I stood in our cramped living room, hands trembling at my sides, as Mom's words sliced through me like a dull blade. Don't be ridiculous, Genevieve. Why would we waste money on your debutante ball when you don't even try to look presentable? Her voice was sharp, edged, with that familiar disappointment I'd heard since I could remember. Across the room, Lauren lounged on the sagging couch, smirking as she flipped through glossy gown catalogs, her auburn hair catching the lamplight like it was meant to. My twin sister. My mirror in so many ways, yet here she was, already crowned the family's golden ticket. It's my 17th birthday too, I said, my voice smaller than I wanted, barely a whisper against the hum of the TV Dad always left on. We're twins. It's supposed to be for both of us. I hated how it sounded, like a plea, not a demand. Mom didn't even look up from the grocery list she was scribbling, her pen scratching louder than my words. Genevieve, Dad said, his tone flat, not lifting his eyes from the newspaper spread across his lap. Be practical. These events are about connections, finding suitable matches. It's an investment and, well, he paused, folding the paper with a crisp snap. Paying for yours would be throwing money away. The air thickened, heavy with the truth they didn't bother hiding anymore. I glanced at Lauren, waiting for her to say something, anything, but she just turned a page, her lips curling slightly. My hands balled into fists, nails digging into my palms. At 17, I learned exactly where I stood in the white family hierarchy. Below my identical twin, the pretty one, in a house scraping by on middle-class dreams. They'd decided long ago that beauty was the currency to cash in, and Lauren, with her effortless charm, was their bet to climb higher. Me? I was the spare, the one who'd never shine bright enough to matter. Mom nodded at Dad's words, her agreement a silent hammer driving the nail deeper. Lauren's the investment, sweetheart, she said, finally meeting my eyes with a pitying smile. You're sensible. You've got other qualities. You should understand the difference by now. Sensible, plain. The labels stuck to me like damp clothes, cold and clinging. I fought the tears prickling behind my eyes, my throat tight as I turned away. Later, I locked myself in the bathroom Lauren and I shared, the chipped mirror throwing back a face so like hers. Same auburn hair, same green eyes, same sharp cheekbones. Identical, they'd called us as kids. But somewhere along the way, they'd convinced themselves she was the beauty and I was the afterthought. I traced my reflection, searching for the flaw they saw, the one that made me less. The signs had always been there, piling up like dust in our modest Minneapolis home. Lauren got new dresses for school dances. I got her faded hand-me-downs. She twirled in ballet classes while I trudged to the library, free and quiet. Her C's were shrugged off with a laugh. She's got charm, while my A's were expected, barely noticed. I'd coped by burying myself in books, telling myself if I couldn't be the pretty one, I'd be something else. But standing there, the weight of their choice pressed down, heavy and unyielding. They weren't just favoring Lauren, they were erasing me, bit by bit, until I was nothing but the shadow they didn't bother to see. Aunt Margaret's visit was rare, a breath of air in our stale routine. She'd watched Mom snap at me about my messy hair. You could at least try, Genevieve. And later, when the house quieted, she pulled me aside. Her hands were warm on my shoulders, her voice a low whisper that cut through the fog. Your parents think they're setting you both up for success, but they're wrong. Beauty fades, Genevieve. Grit, brains, heart. These appreciate over time. I stared at her, her graying curls framing a face that saw more than Mom or Dad ever would. She wasn't like them, chasing some glittering future through Lauren's smile. Her words sank into me, rooting deep as Lauren's debutante ball loomed closer, a storm I couldn't escape. I clung to them that night, replaying them in the dark of my room while the house buzzed with plans that didn't include me. They were a lifeline, thin but strong, promising there was more to me than the mirror they refused to hold up. Maybe, just maybe, I could prove it, if I could survive what was coming. The house turned into a whirlwind of silk and perfume, every corner swallowed by Lauren's debutante ball prep. Mom fluttered around her, pinning tool swatches to a dress form, while Dad tallied costs on a notepad, muttering about worth it. Lauren preened in the center, her laughter light, her green eyes catching every compliment tossed her way. I stood on the edges, invisible, until Mom thrust a curling iron into my hands. Make yourself useful, Genevieve. Help your sister with her hair. I gripped the iron, its heat seeping into my palm as I met Lauren's eyes in the mirror. For a second, I thought I saw something flicker there. Discomfort, maybe. But it vanished as Mom dabbed blush on her cheeks. "You'll come to the ball, right?" Lauren asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Before I could answer, Mom cut in, her tone brisk. "Genevieve will help the catering staff. We need someone to keep an eye on things, and it's good experience for her real-world skills." My hands froze mid-curl, the iron's hum drowning in the rush of blood to my ears. Not a guest, not even a bystander, just the help. Mom laughed, light and dismissive. "Don't be silly. These events are expensive enough with one daughter participating. Besides, the Carter boy will be there, perfect for networking for your college applications." The room spun, their chatter blurring into a dull roar. I'd rehearsed a toast for Lauren, pictured myself in a simple dress, standing equal for once. But this was a slap, a reminder of my place, carved out long before I could fight it. "I'm not going to work as a server at my own sister's party," I said, setting the curling iron down with a clatter that echoed in the sudden quiet. My voice shook, but I held my ground, staring at Mom's arched brow. Dad appeared in the doorway, his face stern. "Don't make a scene, Genevieve. We've already told the catering manager you'll be there. They've adjusted their staffing." "You did this without asking me?" I asked, the words sharp, cutting through the haze. Mom shrugged, adjusting Lauren's necklace. "It's not like you had other plans, and the experience will look good on your resume." I turned to Lauren, searching for a flicker of support, but she studied her manicure, her silence louder than any words. The betrayal settled heavy in my chest, a stone I couldn't swallow. I left without another sound, retreating to my room, the thin walls carrying their voices. Excited chatter, last-minute fixes, compliments for Lauren. I sat on my bed, trembling with anger and hurt, the curling iron's heat still lingering on my skin. They hadn't just denied me a celebration, they'd turned me into a prop for hers, a shadow to make her shine brighter. I pressed my palms to my eyes, willing the tears back. This wasn't new, but it was sharper now, a wound I couldn't ignore anymore. Dressed in the black slacks and white shirt they'd laid out, I stood in the Grand Hotel's kitchen, the clatter of trays drowning out the music beyond the service door. Through the crack, I watched Lauren glide down the grand staircase, her gown shimmering under the chandeliers, the crowd erupting in applause. Mom and Dad beamed from the sidelines, their pride a spotlight I'd never felt. I balanced a tray of champagne flutes, the glass cold against my hands, my reflection a ghost in their shine. Guests brushed past, their laughter a hum I couldn't join. "Family of the debutante?" one of the real caterers asked, noticing my stare fixed on Lauren twirling below. "No," I said, my voice flat, something hardening inside me like steel cooling in the dark. "Just the help." The words tasted bitter, but they fit, exactly what they'd made me. I carried the trays all night, invisible to the glittering crowd, my parents' smiles never faltering as Lauren danced with boys in tailored suits. The Carter boy was there, Yale-bound, oblivious to the sister in the shadows. I'd accepted no gown, no party of my own, even rehearsed that damn toast. But this humiliation, this deliberate relegation, was a line crossed. As the last flute left my tray, I made a vow in the quiet of my mind, sharp and unyielding. This was the last time they'd define my worth. I'd break free, not just from this night, but from them. Whatever it took. The Monday after Lauren's ball, I walked into Mrs. Carter's office with a plan clutched in my hands, my footsteps steady despite the ache still pulsing from that night. I slid my meticulously typed proposal across her desk, the paper crinkling under my fingers. "I'd like to graduate early," I said, meeting her surprised gaze. "I've calculated the credits I need. With summer courses and extra classes, I can finish by December instead of May." She adjusted her glasses, scanning the numbers, her eyebrows lifting as she traced my logic. "This is ambitious, Genevieve," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "May I ask why?" I swallowed, the humiliation of the ball still raw, a splinter under my skin. "The sooner I graduate, the sooner I can start college and become self-sufficient," I replied, my tone firm. "I've researched scholarships, early admission programs. I just need your help to make it happen." She leaned back, studying me, and I held my breath, waiting for the pity I'd seen too often. Instead, she smiled, a small, genuine curve. "Let's do it," she said, and relief flooded me, warm and sudden. Within weeks, Mrs. Carter became my advocate, enrolling me in additional courses and weekend programs. My days stretched from dawn to dusk, a blur of textbooks and notes. But each completed assignment felt like a step toward freedom, a brick laid in a wall between me and that hotel kitchen. I wasn't just running from them anymore. I was building something they couldn't touch. I came home one evening, my backpack heavy with syllabi, to find Mom and Dad waiting at the kitchen table, their faces tight with disapproval. "This early graduation nonsense is unnecessary," Dad said, his voice gruff as he tapped the table. "You're pushing yourself too hard. No one expects you to compete with Lauren's social success." The words stung, but I'd expected them, braced myself for their predictable scorn. "I'm not competing with Lauren," I replied evenly, setting my bag down with a thud. "I'm securing my future," Mom scoffed, her laugh a brittle thing. "Your future? You're 17, Genevieve. Your father and I have already discussed your college options. A nice state school, perfectly adequate for someone with your practical outlook." Her dismissal was a rehearsed line, one they'd fed me for years, but I wasn't bending this time. "I'm applying to top-tier universities," I said, my voice steady, cutting through her smirk. "And I'm going to get in." She exchanged a look with Dad, a mix of amusement and pity that made my skin crawl. "With what money?" she asked, leaning forward. "Those schools cost a fortune, and we've been clear about our financial priorities." I straightened, meeting her eyes. "I'll get scholarships. I've already contacted several programs." "And if you don't?" Dad challenged, his tone sharp. "We've allocated our savings for Lauren's future. You've always been the practical one. Be practical now." Their united front was infuriating, a wall I'd slammed against too many times, but I held my ground. Later, alone in my room, Lauren leaned against my doorframe, her voice low. "They'll never let you do it, you know. They've got everything planned. Community college, then somewhere cheap for you." I looked up from my books, her warning a crack in their armor I hadn't expected. I started staying late at school, using the library computers to check application portals, my heart pounding with every refresh. One evening, the screen glowed with "Congratulations from Harvard," and I nearly collapsed in the quiet study area, my breath catching. Full scholarship. I printed the letter, hands trembling, then checked again. Yale, Columbia, each with substantial aid packages. The words blurred through my tears, validation after years of being told I wasn't worth the investment. I tucked the pages into my backpack, a secret weight I carried home. That night, I stopped by Aunt Margaret's apartment, the envelopes burning a hole in my bag. She read them, her eyes widening, then pulled me into a fierce hug. "I knew you could do it," she said, her voice thick. "Have you told your parents?" I shook my head, hesitation creeping in. "Not yet. I'm afraid they'll find a way to stop me." She nodded, understanding flashing in her gray eyes. "You're 18 now. Genevieve. Legally, they can't prevent you. But they control my documents. Birth certificate, social security card, everything I'd need, I said, panic edging my words. Aunt Margaret's expression shifted, a quiet resolve settling in. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a sealed envelope. Actually, they don't, she said, handing it to me. After the ball, I prepared for this. I've got duplicates of all your essentials, and this. She gave me a bank statement, $25,000 in an account for me. It's not full tuition, but with your scholarships, it's enough. I stared at her, stunned, my hands trembling again. Just shine, she said simply, and for the first time my future felt truly mine. When I got home, the house was dark, silent, except for Lauren sitting alone in the living room, her silhouette stark against the flickering TV. Where have you been? She asked, her voice flat, almost hollow. The library, I said automatically, dropping my bag. She held up 3 envelopes, my acceptance letters, the physical copies that had arrived while I was out. My heart sank as she read them aloud, her tone breaking slightly. Harvard, Yale, Columbia, all with scholarships, full ride at Harvard. I reached for them, but she pulled back, her eyes locking on mine. Did you know I applied to colleges too? She said, tears welling. State schools, nothing fancy. I got in, but when I told Mom and Dad, they said it wasn't part of the plan, that the money was better spent on my social connections. I stared at her, the revelation hitting like a wave. You wanted to go to college? I asked, my voice soft. Of course I did, she snapped, wiping her eyes. You think I like being their prize, groomed for some rich husband? She handed me the letters, her hands shaking. Take these and go. One of us should escape at least. The air between us shifted, a fragile bridge forming where competition had always stood. They'd kept us so focused on fighting each other that we'd never seen how they were controlling us both, trapping her in a gilded cage as surely as they'd locked me out. The night before my departure, I was folding the last of my clothes when Dad knocked on my bedroom door, his shadow filling the frame. He sat on the edge of my bed without invitation, his hands clasped, his face set in that serious look he reserved for money talks. We need to discuss finances, he said, his voice low, deliberate. I paused, a shirt half folded in my hands, waiting for the catch I knew was coming. My scholarship covers tuition, room, and board, I replied warily, setting the shirt down. Aunt Margaret's helping with books and living expenses. He nodded, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, well, about that, he began, leaning forward. Your mother and I have been thinking, now that you're going to this fancy school, you'll have connections, important people. It'd be good for you to keep ties with the family. I stayed silent, sensing the real pitch lurking beneath his words. We've invested a lot in you over the years, he continued, his tone shifting to something almost reasonable. Your upbringing, your education through high school, it's only fair that, once you're established, you help support us, especially Lauren. I stared at him incredulous, the audacity stealing my breath. After years of telling me I wasn't worth a dime, they were staking a claim on my future. Are you asking me to pay you back for raising me? I asked, my voice tight. Not immediately, he clarified, as if that softened it. But down the line, when you're a lawyer. Family helps family. I forced a neutral. I'll think about it, unwilling to spark a fight with my bags half packed. As soon as Dad left, I texted Lauren, my fingers flying over the screen. Need to talk. Meet at Margaret's tomorrow before I leave. The next morning, I hauled my boxes to Aunt Margaret's apartment, where Lauren waited, her eyes red-rimmed but brightening when she saw me. Ready for your grand escape? She asked, grabbing a bag to help, her voice lighter than I'd heard in months. I nodded, but my chest tightened with what I had to say. Almost, I replied, setting a box down. But first, I need to tell you something. I explained Dad's visit, his expectation that I'd bankroll them, and her, once I succeeded. They're already planning how to use you to control me, I finished, watching her face harden, the softness fading. They never stop, do they? She said, her words clipped, a mirror to my own frustration. I shook my head. No, but we can. I outlined my plan. I'd go to Harvard as planned, but I'd help her apply for late admission to a college, near me. With Aunt Margaret's savings and part-time jobs, we could break free together. They'll cut me off completely, Lauren warned, her hands twisting in her lap, years of their conditioning weighing her down. Let them, I said, firmly. Between my scholarship and what Margaret saved, we'll make it work. We'll be free. She hesitated, her green eyes searching mine. What if I'm not smart enough? What if I can't make it on my own? You can, I assured her, gripping her hand. And you won't be alone. We'll be together, equals, at last. Before she could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Your father and I are coming to Boston with you. Hotel booked for the week. We want to see where our investment is going. I showed Lauren, dread sinking in. They're going to try to establish a foothold, Aunt Margaret warned as we loaded my belongings into her car, her voice low, urgent. Make connections at Harvard, charm your professors. They'll turn your achievement into their social currency. She was right, and it threatened everything. My fresh start, Lauren's potential escape. I glanced at Lauren, her jaw tight, and knew we had hours, not days, to hold our fragile plan together. Outside, Mom and Dad watched from the porch as I stacked the last box, their expressions a mix of resentment and something that might have been pride if they'd let it show. Dad stepped forward as I shut the trunk. Remember what we discussed, he said, his tone heavy with expectation. I will, I replied, the words deliberately vague, my face a mask as I slid into the passenger seat. Aunt Margaret started the engine, and I didn't look back, the house shrinking in the side mirror. Lauren sat in the back, silent, her hands clenched around the acceptance letters she'd handed me. We'd formed an alliance these past weeks, packing in secret, storing boxes here, whispering plans when the house slept. I'd researched schools for her, ways to dodge their grip after she turned 18, but now, with them trailing me to Boston, our freedom teetered on a knife's edge. They can't stop me legally, I said, more to myself than her, gripping the seatbelt. But they'll try every other way. We'll figure it out, Lauren murmured, her voice shaky but resolute, the first thread of defiance I'd heard from her in years. I nodded, clinging to that as Aunt Margaret drove us toward the highway, the Minneapolis skyline fading behind us. My future was in my hands, but their shadow loomed, a storm I'd have to outrun. 10 years slipped by in a blur of ink and ambition. At 37, I stood in my corner office at Preston and Associates, Minneapolis, sprawling beyond the glass, a partner, the youngest in the firm's history. Harvard had sharpened me, Columbia Law had honed me, and every late night, every case won, had built this life, mine alone. Lauren's path had been rockier. She'd stayed behind, swayed by Mom and Dad's promises of support that never came, her potential buried under their expectations. Now, she was a single mom to Ethan, 7, and Sophie, 4, living in their basement, her spark dimmed by dead-end relationships with men they'd handpicked. We'd kept sporadic contact, mostly about the kids I adored, despite the distance they'd fostered. Her messages grew desperate lately, Dad's health failing, their money drying up, and I braced myself for what I knew was coming. They shuffled into my office unannounced one Tuesday, Mom's makeup masking stress lines, Dad leaning on a cane, his once imposing frame diminished. Genevieve, Mom began, forcing warmth. You look successful. I straightened my suit, meeting her eyes. I am, I said coolly, not offering seats. What brings you here after all this time? Dad cleared his throat, his hands trembling. We need your help, medical bills, the mortgage. We're facing bankruptcy. Lauren can't work with the kids. And we thought, given your position? I let their words hang, memories flooding back. The ball, their dismissal of my dreams, Dad's demand for my future earnings. I don't think so, I said calmly. It's just a matter of investment, you know. It'd be a waste of money. Mom's face paled, her own words haunting her. Dad protested weakly. That was different. We were being realistic about your prospects. I turned to the window, the skyline steadying me. And I'm being realistic about yours. You made it clear family's about investment, not support. By your metric, you're a poor one now. That evening I called Lauren, her voice cutting through the static. They came to see you, didn't they? She asked, knowing without me saying. Yes, I confirmed. I didn't give them what they wanted, but I've set up trust funds for Ethan and Sophie, vocational training for you. Real opportunities, not promises. She paused, her breath hitching. Thank you for not forgetting me, she said, thick with emotion. Never, I promised, leaning back in my chair. We were both their daughters, even if they couldn't see our worth. We talked into the night, rebuilding the bridge they'd burned, my refusal to them a lifeline for her. Watching their car fade from my window earlier, I'd felt no triumph, just quiet satisfaction in breaking their cycle. My real investment was in myself, in the compassion I'd kept despite them, a return no one could measure.